You won't believe what happened when this HOA went to war over security cameras, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. This retired cybersecurity expert's response? Pure genius. Have you ever encountered someone who was so obsessed with control that they lost touch with common sense? Well, buckle up, because this story about how a homeowners association tried to strip away a family's right to protect their home will leave you shaking your head and cheering at the end. Chen stood in his driveway, admiring the craftsmanship of his newly installed security system. After 23 years of protecting Fortune 500 companies from cyber threats, he'd finally retired to what he thought would be a quiet life in the prestigious Oakwood Gardens community. The cameras were discreet, small, slate-gray units that blended seamlessly with his home's modern architecture. He'd specifically chosen this model for its understated design, knowing that some homeowners could be sensitive about visible security equipment. His new home, a contemporary craftsman with clean lines and natural stone accents, represented everything he and his wife had worked for. The carefully maintained gardens, the peaceful cul-de-sac location, and the diverse community of professionals had drawn them to this neighborhood. Their decision to move from downtown Seattle had been driven by a desire for tranquility, but Marcus's professional instincts about security never quite switched off. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his manicured lawn as he made final adjustments to the camera angles. His neighbor Jim Rodriguez was tending to his prized rose bushes next door. Jim, a retired police officer with salt and pepper hair and warm brown eyes, had become something of a mentor to Marcus in navigating the intricate social dynamics of Oakwood Gardens. "Looking good, Marcus," Jim called out, pulling off his gardening gloves. "But you might want to brace yourself. Victoria spotted those cameras yesterday during her daily inspection walk. She was taking pictures." Marcus raised an eyebrow. He'd heard about Victoria Blackwood, the HOA president, during the home buying process. His real estate agent had diplomatically described her as detail-oriented. Other neighbors had been less charitable in their descriptions. "The cameras meet all local ordinances," Marcus replied, his voice calm but firm. "I reviewed the HOA guidelines thoroughly before installation. There's nothing in there about security systems." Jim chuckled, but there was a note of warning in his laugh. "Victoria has a way of interpreting rules creatively when something offends her aesthetic sensibilities. Trust me, I've seen it before." As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender, Victoria Blackwood, HOA President. Subject line, urgent, unauthorized modifications to property exterior. Marcus felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the same one he used to get when detecting a sophisticated cyber threat. He opened the email and his eyes narrowed as he read the first line. "It has come to our attention that you have installed unauthorized surveillance equipment visible from common areas, which violates Section 7(3) of our community guidelines regarding external modifications that impact neighborhood aesthetics." Jim, noticing Marcus's expression, leaned against the fence. "Let me guess, Victoria's special welcome wagon has arrived?" "Something like that," Marcus replied, already formulating multiple strategies in his mind. "She's citing a clause about aesthetic modifications. Interesting interpretation." "Classic Victoria," Jim sighed. "She tried the same thing with my solar panels last year. But something tells me she doesn't know what she's getting into this time." Marcus smiled slightly, the kind of smile that had preceded some of his most brilliant security solutions. "You know, Jim, in cybersecurity, we had a saying, the best defense is a well-documented offense. I think it's time to put those skills to use in a different arena. If you're enjoying this wild ride so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't Want to miss what happens next because Marcus's response to Victoria's demands? Well, let's just say it's about to make HOA history. Join our growing community of viewers who love seeing justice served with a side of clever strategy. Stay tuned for the next part, where we'll see exactly how Marcus begins to handle this situation. And believe me, it's not at all what Victoria Blackwood was expecting. A certified letter arrived in Marcus's mailbox 3 days later. The crisp white envelope bore the embossed logo of Oakwood Gardens HOA, and beneath it, Victoria Blackwood's perfectly penned signature. Marcus noted the time and date on his phone as he carefully opened the envelope, maintaining the kind of detailed documentation that had served him well throughout his career. The letter inside was printed on heavy cardstock. Clearly meant to convey authority, it outlined a series of alleged violations, each more creatively interpreted than the last. Victoria had gone beyond the initial aesthetic complaint, now citing concerns about privacy infringement, potential decreased property values, and even suggesting that visible security measures might attract criminal elements by implying the neighborhood was unsafe. Marcus took his time reading through the document, his expression remaining neutral even as he noticed Sarah Martinez, the youngest HOA board member, walking her golden retriever past his house. She slowed down, clearly trying to get a glimpse of the cameras that had caused such an uproar. When their eyes met, she gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod before continuing her walk. Inside his home office, Marcus pulled up the complete HOA guidelines on his dual monitors. As a cybersecurity expert, he'd learned that the devil was always in the details. He began cross-referencing each cited violation against the actual bylaws, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet of discrepancies. The more he dug, the more obvious it became that Victoria was overreaching, dramatically. His phone buzzed with a text from Jim. Emergency HOA meeting called for Friday. Topic: security and aesthetic standards. Looks like Victoria's making a move. Marcus leaned back in his ergonomic chair, remembering a similar situation from his corporate days. A CEO had once tried to block his implementation of crucial security protocols because they were unsightly on the company's sleek devices. That situation had taught him an invaluable lesson about presenting security measures in a way that appealed to both practical and aesthetic sensibilities. The next morning, Marcus noticed Eleanor Thompson, the retired school principal who served on the HOA board, examining his front yard during her morning walk. Unlike Victoria's aggressive documentation, Eleanor's inspection seemed more curious than condemning. Marcus decided to seize the opportunity. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," he called out, emerging from his garage with a fresh cup of coffee. "Oh, would you like to see what all the fuss is about up close?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment before her educational instincts took over. "Well, I suppose it would be prudent to understand the situation fully before Friday's meeting." Marcus led her through a detailed explanation of the security system, pointing out how each camera was strategically placed to maximize coverage while minimizing visibility. He showed her the high-end materials used, the careful color matching to his home's exterior, and the professional-grade installation work. "You know," Eleanor mused, adjusting her reading glasses, "Victoria showed us very different photos at the last board meeting. The angles she chose made everything look quite imposing." "Perspective can be deceiving," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Would you like to see the actual footage quality? It might help the board understand why this specific system was chosen." Inside his home office, Marcus demonstrated the system's capabilities, including its ability to detect genuine security threats while ignoring harmless activity like passing cars or wandering cats. Eleanor seemed particularly impressed by the system's sophisticated privacy features, which automatically blurred neighbors' windows and private areas. "This is rather different from what we were led to believe," Eleanor admitted, making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Victoria suggested it was more of a surveillance state situation. As Eleanor left, Marcus noticed Victoria, power walking past his house, her designer athletic wear immaculate despite the morning humidity. She was speaking intensely into her phone, gesturing at his property as she passed. Through his kitchen window, he could see her stopping to take more photos, this time of his backyard cameras. That evening, Marcus received another email from Victoria, this one copying the entire HOA board. It detailed additional concerns raised by numerous residents about the security system's impact on the community. Marcus noted that no specific residents were named and no actual complaints were quoted. He spent the night preparing a comprehensive response, not to Victoria's email, but to what he knew would come next. His experience had taught him that people like Victoria often escalated situations when their initial attempts at control were met with resistance. He began gathering documentation, local ordinances about home security, crime statistics for neighboring communities without security standards.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
And market research showing how visible security measures often increased property values in upscale neighborhoods. Just before midnight, Marcus received an unexpected email from Sarah Martinez. Some board members are questioning Victoria's interpretation of the bylaws, she wrote. Would you be willing to provide technical documentation about your system before Friday's meeting? Strictly for research purposes, of course. Marcus smiled as he composed his reply. In his experience, the key to winning these battles wasn't just about being right. It was about building the right allies and presenting information in a way that addressed everyone's underlying concerns. Victoria might have thrown down the gauntlet, but she had no idea she was dealing with someone who had spent decades protecting millions in assets from far more sophisticated threats than an overzealous HOA president. As he prepared for bed, Marcus pulled up the security camera feeds one last time. Victoria's car was parked at the end of his street, its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. She appeared to be taking more photos, using her phone's flash this time. Marcus quietly activated the system's new feature, a timestamp watermark that would prove exactly when each camera had been installed, well before any official complaints were filed. The stage was set for Friday's meeting, but Marcus had learned long ago that the real battles were won in the preparation phase. As he closed his laptop, he couldn't help but think that Victoria's crusade against his security cameras might end up teaching her an unexpected lesson about the true meaning of security and community standards. Victoria's emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening in the Oakwood Gardens Community Center, a craftsman-style building that perfectly matched the neighborhood's upscale aesthetic. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early, carrying a sleek leather briefcase containing meticulously organized documentation. The parking lot was already filling up. Clearly, Victoria's crusade against his security system had captured the community's attention. Inside the meeting room, Marcus chose a seat that gave him a clear view of both the board's table and the general audience area. He noticed Sarah Martinez setting up the projector, her movements betraying a slight nervousness as Victoria watched her every move from the head of the table. Eleanor Thompson sat nearby, reviewing papers through her reading glasses, while other board members filtered in, engaged in hushed conversations. Jim Rodriguez slipped into the seat beside Marcus, his police instincts evident as he scanned the room. Biggest turnout I've seen since the Great Garden Gnome debate of 2022, he whispered. Victoria's been working the phones all week, rallying her supporters, but she might have overplayed her hand this time. The meeting began precisely at 7, with Victoria wielding her gavel with practiced authority. She wore a perfectly pressed blazer in the HOA's official colors, her presentation clearly designed to project authority and control. The agenda's first item was titled Security Measures and Community Standards Protecting Our Property Values. Victoria began her presentation with a series of carefully chosen photographs of Marcus's security cameras, each shot taken from angles that made them appear far more prominent than they actually were. The PowerPoint slides were overlaid with red circles and arrows, highlighting what she termed aesthetic violations. As your HOA president, Victoria's voice carried across the room with practiced precision, it is my duty to protect our community's standards. These unauthorized installations represent a troubling trend that could impact all of our property values. Several residents have expressed concerns about privacy and the changing character of our neighborhood. Marcus noticed Sarah Martinez's subtle eye roll as Victoria clicked through more slides, each one more dramatically presented than the last. The young board member's laptop screen reflected what appeared to be the actual HOA bylaws. Interesting timing. When Victoria opened the floor for community input, the first few speakers were clearly her allies. A retired marketing executive spoke at length about neighborhood branding. A real estate agent, not Sarah, worried about buyer perceptions. But then the tide began to turn. Dr. Patricia Wong, a renowned psychiatrist who lived 3 doors down from Marcus, raised her hand. I've been meaning to ask about security systems, actually. After my colleague's home was broken into in Cedar Heights last month, I've been considering installation myself. I'd love to hear more about the technical specifications. Victoria's attempt to redirect the conversation was interrupted by Eleanor Thompson, clearing her throat. Perhaps we should hear from Mr. Chen about the actual system before making any decisions. As a board, we have a responsibility to understand what we're voting on fully. Marcus stood, buttoning his jacket with the same calm precision he'd used before countless corporate presentations. He connected his laptop to the projector, and the room dimmed. His first slide showed a 3-dimensional rendering of his home with small green dots indicating each camera's location and coverage area. "Thank you for this opportunity," he began, his voice steady and professional. "I'd like to address both the aesthetic and security concerns that have been raised. First, let's look at the actual visibility of these cameras compared to the photos we saw earlier. Using state-of-the-art modeling software, Marcus demonstrated how the cameras blended with his home's architecture. He showed daytime and evening views, highlighting the system's discrete design. Then he moved to the technical specifications, explaining the advanced privacy features that prevented any recording of neighboring properties. "What many don't realize," Marcus continued, pulling up crime statistics for nearby neighborhoods, is that visible security measures actually deter criminal activity without decreasing property values. In fact, according to recent real estate studies, Sarah Martinez, who had been quietly taking notes, suddenly sat up straighter. She passed a document to Eleanor, who adjusted her glasses and began reading intently. Victoria noticed the exchange, her fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around her gavel. Marcus proceeded to share documentation from 3 different security consulting firms, each confirming that his system not only met, but exceeded industry best practices for residential security. He included testimonials from several private security firms about the positive impact of visible security measures on high-end communities. As he wrapped up his presentation, Marcus revealed his masterstroke, a letter from the police department's community liaison office praising the system's potential contribution to neighborhood safety. The letter specifically mentioned how such security measures could help protect not just his property, but the entire street. Victoria's face remained composed, but her slightly tapping foot betrayed her growing frustration. When Marcus finished, the room erupted in questions. not about aesthetic concerns, but about security features, installation costs, and whether Marcus would be willing to consult on similar systems for other homes. Eleanor Thompson raised her hand, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Chen, would you be willing to work with the board to develop security guidelines that could help other homeowners install similar systems while maintaining our community's aesthetic standards? Before Marcus could respond, Victoria interjected, "We need to focus on the violation at hand. The current installation clearly contradicts Section 7(3) of our bylaws regarding exterior modifications." Sarah Martinez, who had remained quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke up. "Actually, I've been reviewing our bylaws carefully. Section 7(3) specifically addresses permanent structural modifications. Security systems are covered under Section 12(1), which allows for reasonable security measures that don't impede on neighbor privacy. Mr. Chen's system appears to meet all our existing criteria." The room fell silent as Victoria reached for the bylaws, her perfectly manicured nails flipping through the pages with increasing urgency. Marcus caught Jim trying to suppress a smile as the HOA president realized her mistake. She had built her entire case on the wrong section of the very rules she was supposed to enforce. The weekend following the HOA meeting passed with an unusual quiet in Oakwood Gardens. Marcus spent Sunday morning upgrading his home automation system, the gentle clicking of his keyboard accompanied by the distant sound of lawn mowers and children playing. The security cameras continued their silent vigil, now joined by small, professionally printed signs stating 24/7 security monitoring in progress, a detail Victoria had overlooked in her crusade against the cameras themselves. His cell phone lit up with a message from Sarah Martinez. Emergency board meeting called for Wednesday. Victoria's citing new evidence of violations. Thought you should know. Attached was a screenshot of an email thread between board members, with Victoria emphasizing the need for swift action to address growing security concerns. Marcus took a sip of his green tea, contemplating the situation. In his years of cybersecurity work, he'd learned that desperate adversaries often made their biggest mistakes when backed into a corner. He opened his laptop and began documenting every interaction, every email, and every photograph Victoria had taken of his property. The timestamp data from his cameras proved particularly interesting. Victoria had been photographing his house at increasingly unusual hours. Monday morning brought a new development. As Marcus returned from his morning run, he noticed a sleek, black SUV parked across from his driveway. A man in an expensive suit was examining his property through the car's tinted windows. Marcus recognized him immediately. Richard Sterling, Victoria's personal attorney, known for handling the HOA's more contentious issues. Instead of confronting Sterling, Marcus activated his phone's camera and documented the surveillance. He'd learned long ago that knowledge was power, especially when dealing with legal intimidation tactics. Within minutes, he received a text from Jim. "Heads up, Sterling's making rounds. 3 complaints filed against different homeowners this morning, all security related." Marcus spent his lunch break reviewing the HOA's legal history, which Sarah had quietly shared with him. A pattern emerged. Victoria had previously used similar tactics to enforce her interpretation of the rules, often targeting residents who challenged her authority. However, she'd never faced someone with Marcus's combination of technical expertise and methodical documentation. By Tuesday afternoon, the community was buzzing with speculation about the upcoming emergency meeting. Eleanor Thompson stopped by Marcus's house, ostensibly to discuss her garden plans, but clearly carrying other concerns. "Victoria's convinced several board members that your cameras pose a privacy risk," Eleanor explained, absently adjusting her gardening hat. "She's hired a security consultant to evaluate the system." She paused, choosing her words carefully. The consultant has interesting qualifications. Marcus thanked Eleanor for the information, already formulating his response. He spent the evening preparing a comprehensive security audit of his system, including certification from 3 independent security firms. He also documented how his camera's privacy zones actually provided more protection for neighbors than the unregulated doorbell cameras many homes already had installed. Wednesday morning arrived with a surprise. Victoria had arranged for a professional security assessment team to evaluate the entire neighborhood. As Marcus watched from his home office window, men in high-visibility vests walked the streets, taking photographs and measurements. The irony wasn't lost on him. In her attempt to remove his security cameras, Victoria had inadvertently brought even more surveillance to Oakwood Gardens. Sarah Martinez called during her lunch break, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "They're trying to establish that your cameras violate some obscure line-of-sight regulation. Sterling's presenting at tonight's meeting, but..." She lowered her voice. "I've been doing some research. Victoria's consultant isn't licensed in our state." Marcus thanked her for the information and spent the next few hours preparing additional documentation. He pulled up satellite imagery of the neighborhood, marking every existing security camera, doorbell camera, and surveillance device already in use. The resulting map told an interesting story, one that Victoria had conveniently overlooked. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus noticed increased activity around his property. Sterling's black SUV made 3 more passes, each time with different passengers taking photos. Victoria herself power-walked past twice, her phone held up conspicuously as she documented his house from various angles. At precisely 4:30 p.m., Marcus received an email from the HOA board. The emergency meeting's agenda had been updated to include a vote on new security device regulations that would effectively ban most modern security systems. The proposed rules were clearly written to target his setup specifically, but in their haste, Victoria and Sterling had created guidelines that would impact nearly every home in the community. Jim appeared at Marcus's door just before dinner, his expression grave, but his eyes twinkling with barely suppressed amusement. "You see the new agenda?" he asked, settling into a chair in Marcus's kitchen. "They're going nuclear. But check this out." He pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a community forum where residents were actively discussing the implications of the proposed regulations. "They didn't think it through," Jim continued. "Half the neighborhood has doorbell cameras that would violate these new rules. The other half is worried about property values dropping if we become the only upscale community in the area without modern security features." Marcus nodded, pulling up his own analysis on his tablet. "Victoria's not just overreaching now. She's actively working against the community's interests, and I've got the data to prove it." As the sun set over Oakwood Gardens, Marcus made one final preparation for the evening's meeting. He compiled a detailed report showing how Victoria's proposed regulations would affect property values, insurance rates, and community safety. The data was irrefutable, presented in the same clear, professional manner that had won him countless corporate battles. The community center's parking lot was already full when Marcus arrived for the emergency meeting. He noticed several unfamiliar faces, homeowners who rarely attended HOA meetings but had been drawn out by concerns over the new security proposals. Victoria stood at the front of the room, engaged in intense discussion with Sterling and 2 men Marcus recognized from the morning security assessment team. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine not just the fate of Marcus's security system, but the future of security measures throughout Oakwood Gardens. As he took his seat, Marcus couldn't help but remember an old saying from his cybersecurity days. The best defense isn't just about having the right security. It's about having the right documentation when someone questions it. The emergency HOA meeting opened with an unexpected twist. Victoria's security consultant, Dr. Andrew Pierce, took the podium first, armed with a laser pointer and a stack of glossy photographs. His credentials were displayed prominently on the first slide. A PhD in urban planning and numerous certifications in community development. What the presentation failed to mention, as Marcus had discovered, was that these credentials were primarily focused on landscape architecture rather than security systems. Marcus watched with measured interest as Dr. Pierce launched into an elaborate presentation about visibility zones and aesthetic impact radiuses. The consultant had created detailed heat maps showing what he termed security device saturation in the neighborhood, with Marcus's property glowing an ominous red at the center. Sarah Martinez, sitting at the board table, kept glancing at her laptop screen, her expression growing increasingly skeptical as Dr. Pierce continued his presentation. Eleanor Thompson was taking copious notes, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose, while Victoria sat with perfect posture, nodding approvingly at each of the consultant's points. As you can see, Dr. Pierce gestured to a particularly complex diagram. The current security installation creates what we call a surveillance pressure zone that extends well beyond the property lines. Our studies show this can lead to decreased property values and increased anxiety among residents. Marcus noticed several of his neighbors exchanging puzzled glances. Dr. Patricia Wong, the psychiatrist, was barely concealing her amusement at the consultant's amateur psychological assertions. Even Richard Sterling, Victoria's attorney, seemed uncomfortable with some of the more outlandish claims. During a brief break in the presentation, Marcus quietly distributed USB drives to each board member. Each contained a comprehensive analysis of actual security studies, property value data, and crime statistics from similar communities. He had also included testimonials from security experts who had reviewed his system, real experts with current licenses and relevant credentials. When Dr. Pierce finally concluded, Victoria immediately moved to bring the new security regulations to a vote. However, Eleanor Thompson cleared her throat meaningfully. I believe we should review the additional materials we've just received before proceeding with any vote. Victoria's perfectly maintained smile faltered slightly. We have our expert's recommendation right here. I don't see the need for additional delay. Sarah Martinez spoke up, her voice clear and professional. Actually, I've been researching Dr. Pierce's background. She turned her laptop around, displaying his professional profile. His expertise seems to be primarily in landscape architecture and urban aesthetics. I'm not seeing any security certifications that would qualify him. To evaluate modern surveillance systems. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dr. Pierce shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie. Victoria attempted to regain control of the narrative, but the damage was done. Homeowners began raising their hands, asking increasingly pointed questions about the methodology behind the consultant's findings. Marcus chose this moment to make his move. He raised his hand and, when acknowledged, approached the podium with quiet confidence. I've taken the liberty of preparing a response to Dr. Pierce's concerns, he began, connecting his laptop to the projector. But first, I'd like to address some inaccuracies in the previous presentation. Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus systematically dismantled each of Dr. Pierce's claims. He presented real-world data from security firms, insurance companies, and law enforcement agencies. His evidence showed that properties with visible security measures actually experienced increased value and decreased criminal activity. Furthermore, Marcus continued, pulling up a satellite view of the neighborhood. I've documented every existing security device in our community. Red dots appeared on the map, showing dozens of doorbell cameras, security lights, and other surveillance devices. Under the proposed regulations, approximately 78% of our homes would be in violation. The room erupted in concerned discussion. Victoria attempted to interject, but her voice was lost in the growing debate. Homeowners were now actively questioning not just the proposed regulations, but the entire process that had led to this emergency meeting. Dr. Wong stood up, her professional authority evident in her stance. As a psychiatrist, I must object to the unfounded claims about security cameras causing anxiety. In fact, my research shows that appropriate security measures often reduce anxiety by providing a sense of control and safety. Richard Sterling, sensing the shifting mood, quietly passed a note to Victoria. She read it, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly. Meanwhile, Eleanor Thompson was methodically going through Marcus's documentation, occasionally nodding and making notes in her leather-bound notebook. Sarah Martinez seized the opportunity to address the technological aspects. Mr. Chen's system actually provides more privacy protection than many of our existing security measures. The privacy zones and encryption protocols exceed industry standards. As the discussion continued, Marcus noticed Jim Rodriguez talking quietly with a group of neighbors, showing them something on his phone. Later, he learned that Jim had been sharing footage from his own doorbell camera of Victoria taking photographs of various homes in the community, often at odd hours. The evening reached its climax when Eleanor Thompson finally spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of her years as an educator. I move that we table the proposed regulations pending a proper security assessment by qualified experts. Furthermore, I suggest we form a committee to develop comprehensive, reasonable guidelines that protect both our security and privacy interests. Victoria attempted one final counter-argument, but her position had been thoroughly undermined. The combination of Marcus's technical expertise, Sarah's research, and the community's growing awareness of the implications had effectively derailed her campaign against modern security measures. As the meeting drew to a close, homeowners gathered in small groups, discussing the evening's revelations. Several approached Marcus to inquire about his security system, while others expressed concern about Victoria's handling of the situation. The HOA president herself left quickly, Sterling in tow, their hushed conversation suggesting this battle was far from over. Marcus packed up his materials thoughtfully, aware that he had won this round, but knowing Victoria well enough by now to expect a different approach next time. As he walked to his car, he noticed Dr. Pierce having an intense phone conversation while hurriedly loading his presentation materials into his trunk. The stars were just becoming visible over Oakwood Gardens as Marcus drove home. His security cameras faithfully monitoring his property just as they had been all along. He couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to remove his security system, Victoria had inadvertently sparked a community-wide conversation about modern security, needs and homeowners' rights. The following week brought an unexpected calm to Oakwood Gardens. Victoria had gone unusually quiet, her morning power walks conspicuously absent from the neighborhood routine. Marcus used this lull to implement his next strategic move, a key, comprehensive security awareness campaign that would transform the entire community's perspective on modern safety measures. Early Monday morning, Marcus began by inviting key neighbors to a casual coffee gathering in his home office. Dr. Patricia Wong, Sarah Martinez, and Eleanor Thompson arrived first, followed by Jim Rodriguez and 3 other homeowners who had shown particular interest in security matters during the emergency meeting. Marcus had transformed his office into a small command center with multiple screens displaying different aspects of modern home security. On one wall, a large monitor showed real-time footage from his system, demonstrating how privacy zones automatically blurred out neighbors' windows and private areas. Another screen displayed current crime statistics from surrounding neighborhoods, while a third ran a continuous feed of security industry news and updates. The key to winning this isn't just about defending our right to security, Marcus explained, gesturing to his carefully prepared presentation. It's about educating the community on why modern security measures are essential in today's world. Sarah Martinez leaned forward, her real estate expertise adding valuable perspective. I've been tracking property values in neighboring communities. Those with coordinated security measures are seeing significant increases in market value. Buyers are actively seeking homes with modern security features. Dr. Wong nodded thoughtfully, adding her professional insight. From a psychological standpoint, visible security measures actually create a sense of community well-being. It's not about paranoia, it's about proactive protection. The group spent the next 2 hours developing a comprehensive strategy. Eleanor Thompson, drawing on her years of educational experience, suggested creating an informational packet for every household. We need to make this accessible to everyone, not just the tech-savvy residents, she emphasized. As they worked, Marcus's security system quietly captured Victoria's car, making another slow pass by his house. This time, however, she wasn't alone. A new figure sat in the passenger seat, someone none of them recognized, but whose presence would soon become significant. By Wednesday, Marcus had prepared a detailed proposal for the HOA board. The document outlined a community-wide security initiative that would establish guidelines for residential security systems while protecting homeowners' rights to implement modern safety measures. He included case studies from similar communities, cost-benefit analyses, and detailed privacy protection protocols. That afternoon, while reviewing the proposal in his garden, Marcus noticed increased activity at Victoria's house. Several expensive cars had parked along her street, and men in business suits were entering and exiting her home. Jim Rodriguez, ever observant, texted Marcus with information he'd gathered during his morning walk. Corporate types, looked like developers, something's brewing. Marcus's cybersecurity instincts kicked in. He began researching local development, projects, property records, and recent real estate transactions in the area. Sarah Martinez proved invaluable, providing insider information about recent inquiries into bulk property purchases in their neighborhood. Thursday morning brought the revelation they needed. Eleanor Thompson arrived at Marcus's door, slightly out of breath from her morning walk. "You need to see this," she said, pulling out her tablet. She had discovered that Victoria's sudden interest in removing security cameras coincided with a major development company's plans to purchase several properties in Oakwood Gardens. The development company, Platinum Ridge Enterprises, had a history of buying properties in upscale neighborhoods and converting them into high-density luxury condominiums. Their standard operating procedure included minimizing visible security measures to make properties appear more exclusive and welcoming. Marcus spent the afternoon documenting connections between Victoria's recent actions and Platinum Ridge's typical acquisition patterns. He discovered that the mysterious figure in Victoria's car had been Thomas Drake, Platinum Ridge's chief acquisition officer. As this information came to light, Marcus received an unexpected email from Victoria. The message was cordial, almost friendly, inviting him to a private meeting to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution to their security system dispute. The meeting was to be held at an upscale restaurant across town, and the email specifically requested that he come alone. Instead of responding immediately, Marcus forwarded the email to Sarah and Jim, then began preparing for what he suspected would be Victoria's most sophisticated attempt yet to remove his security system. He spent hours reviewing similar cases, where development companies had used HOA disputes to facilitate property acquisitions. Friday morning, Marcus implemented the next phase of his plan. He organized a casual neighborhood coffee meeting in his backyard, strategically timed to coincide with Victoria's usual morning walk. The topic of discussion: the importance of maintaining neighborhood character and preventing unwanted development. As neighbors gathered, sharing concerns and stories, Marcus's security cameras quietly recorded Victoria's reaction as she passed by. Her usual confident stride faltered slightly as she observed the growing crowd in Marcus's yard. By mid-afternoon, the community grapevine was buzzing with discussions about development threats and property values. Marcus's security system had become more than just a personal safety measure. It had transformed into a symbol of neighborhood preservation and community autonomy. That evening, as Marcus prepared for his meeting with Victoria, he received an unexpected visit from Eleanor Thompson. She carried a thick folder of HOA historical documents, including the original neighborhood covenant. "I found something interesting," she said, her eyes bright with discovery. "There's a clause here about maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood. It was specifically designed to prevent commercial development." Marcus added this information to his growing arsenal of documentation. As he reviewed his strategy for the upcoming meeting, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Victoria's crusade against his security cameras had inadvertently exposed a much larger threat to the community she claimed to protect. The sun set over Oakwood Gardens, casting long shadows across Marcus's carefully maintained lawn. His security cameras continued their vigilant monitoring, now serving as silent sentinels, not just for his property, but for the entire community's future. Tomorrow's meeting with Victoria would be more than a discussion about security cameras. It would be a decisive moment in determining the fate of their neighborhood. The upscale restaurant Victoria had chosen for their meeting, Le Maison Dorée, sat nestled in the city's financial district, its Art Deco facade a stark contrast to the modern glass towers surrounding it. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, purposefully selecting a table that gave him a clear view of both entrances while keeping his back to a wall. Old habits from his cybersecurity days. Victoria swept in precisely on time, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. She wasn't alone. Thomas Drake, from Platinum Ridge Enterprises, followed close behind, his presence confirming Marcus's suspicions about the true nature of this meeting. "Marcus, thank you for coming." Victoria's smile was practiced, professional. "I hope you don't mind that I invited Tom to join us. He has some fascinating insights into community development that I think you'll want to hear." Marcus nodded politely, maintaining his composed demeanor as they settled into their seats. A sommelier appeared immediately. Clearly, Victoria had made arrangements in advance. As they went through the formality of wine selection, Marcus noticed Drake studying him with the calculated interest of someone sizing up an opponent. "I understand you've developed quite an impressive security system," Drake began, his voice smooth as aged bourbon. "Victoria tells me you have a background in cybersecurity, Fortune 500 companies, wasn't it?" Before Marcus could respond, their waiter arrived with an amuse-bouche, tiny works of culinary art that seemed too precious to eat. Victoria took this opportunity to steer the conversation toward what she called exciting developments for Oakwood Gardens. "The community is at a crossroads," she explained, delicately sampling her appetizer. "Platinum Ridge has a vision for modernizing our neighborhood while maintaining its exclusive character. Their luxury development plan would significantly increase property values." Drake produced a sleek leather portfolio, removing several glossy renderings of modernist buildings with clean lines and expansive glass facades. "We specialize in transforming good communities into exceptional ones," he explained. Our developments typically see a 40% increase in property values within the first year. Marcus studied the renderings while taking measured sips of his water. The designs were undeniably impressive, but his trained eye noticed something interesting. None of the illustrated buildings showed any visible security features. Of course, Victoria continued, her tone carefully modulated, for this vision to work, we need to address certain aesthetic concerns. Modern luxury buyers are particularly sensitive to visible security measures. They tend to prefer more discreet solutions. Drake nodded in agreement. Our market research shows that obvious security features can create an impression of uncertainty about neighborhood safety. We find that integrated invisible systems are more appropriate for upscale communities. Marcus waited patiently as their main courses arrived, a choreographed presentation of French cuisine that would have been impressive if he wasn't so focused on the subtext of this conversation. When the waiter retreated, he finally spoke. "These designs are remarkable," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Though I couldn't help but notice they seem to conflict with our community's original covenant regarding residential character preservation." Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth, while Drake's expression flickered briefly before recovering. Marcus continued, his voice remaining calm and professional. "I've also been reviewing some interesting data about property values in communities with visible security measures. The trends might surprise you." He pulled out his own tablet, displaying graphs that contradicted Drake's claims about security features decreasing property values. "That's not exactly the most relevant data for our target demographic," Drake countered. But Marcus noticed his confident smile had dimmed slightly. Victoria attempted to redirect the conversation. "Marcus, we're prepared to offer you a very generous arrangement to help facilitate these improvements. Platinum Ridge has a program for early adopters who help smooth the transition process." Marcus took a slow sip of his wine, letting the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. "I assume this arrangement would include the removal of my security system." "Among other considerations," Drake interjected, "we're talking about a significant premium over market value for your property, plus priority selection in the new development." The implications were clear. This wasn't just about security cameras anymore. Victoria and Platinum Ridge were orchestrating a complete transformation of Oakwood Gardens, using the security system dispute as a wedge to begin dismantling community resistance. Marcus carefully dabbed his mouth with his napkin before responding. "That's certainly a generous offer, though I wonder if other homeowners know about these plans for our community's future." Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped once against her wine glass, the first crack in her composed facade. "We are approaching this gradually, working with residents who understand the value of progress." "Speaking of residents," Marcus replied, "I had an interesting conversation with Eleanor Thompson about the original neighborhood covenant. She's quite knowledgeable about the legal protections it provides against commercial development." Drake's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Covenants can be amended with sufficient community support." "True," Marcus agreed, "though that usually requires transparent communication with all stakeholders. I imagine tomorrow's community newsletter will generate quite a discussion when it features these development plans." Victoria set down her fork with a bit more force than necessary. "That information isn't public yet. It would be unfortunate if premature speculation created unnecessary controversy." "Transparency tends to prevent controversy," Marcus countered smoothly. "Just like visible security measures tend to prevent criminal activity. Sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones we can see clearly." The rest of the dinner proceeded with strained politeness, the elaborate dessert course tasting like ashes in their mouths as each participant recognized that the evening had not gone as planned. When the check arrived, Drake insisted on paying, his corporate card appearing with practiced smoothness. As they stood to leave, Victoria made one final attempt. "Marcus, I hope you'll consider the bigger picture here. Change is inevitable. It's better to be part of shaping it than standing in its way." Marcus smiled, genuine but firm. "I couldn't agree more about shaping change. In fact, I look forward to discussing these plans with the entire community. Transparency and security go hand in hand, after all." The morning after the dinner meeting, Oakwood Gardens awakened to an unexpected delivery. Every mailbox in the community contained a professionally printed newsletter, its glossy pages detailing Platinum Ridge's development plans alongside comprehensive data about property values, security statistics, and community preservation. Marcus had spent the entire night preparing the documentation, ensuring every claim was backed by verifiable data. Sarah Martinez was the first to react, calling Marcus at dawn. "My phone is exploding with messages from clients," she reported, her voice mixing concern with barely contained excitement. "Half the neighborhood is already discussing the development plans. Victoria must be having a meltdown." Indeed, Victoria's usual morning power walk was conspicuously absent. Instead, a steady stream of luxury vehicles began arriving at her house, their occupants hurrying inside for what appeared to be an emergency damage control session. Marcus's security cameras captured every arrival, including Thomas Drake's distinctive Tesla pulling up at 7:45 a.m. Eleanor Thompson organized an impromptu community gathering in her expansive garden where neighbors clustered in small groups, discussing the revelations over coffee and hastily arranged pastries. The atmosphere crackled with tension and speculation as longtime residents grappled with the implications of Platinum Ridge's plans. Dr. Patricia Wong, who had been silently observing the growing crowd, approached Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "You know, in my practice, we often discuss how environmental stability affects mental well-being. The threat of losing one's community can be extraordinarily stressful." As if to underscore her point, Jim Rodriguez arrived with additional information. His police contacts had provided interesting details about Platinum Ridge's development patterns in other communities. "They typically start with aesthetic disputes," he explained, spreading out photographs of transformed neighborhoods. "Security features are usually their first target. They claim it makes properties look unwelcoming to potential buyers." Marcus noticed Victoria's daughter, Ashley, photographing the gathering from their driveway. The teenager's loyalty to her mother warred visibly with her own concerns about losing the only home she'd ever known. After a moment's hesitation, she walked over to join the discussion. "Mom's been working with Platinum Ridge for months," Ashley revealed, her voice quiet but firm. "They promised her a position on their community relations team after the development is complete, but she doesn't know I overheard them discussing plans to eventually replace all single-family homes with luxury condos." The revelation sent ripples through the gathered crowd. Marcus watched as neighbors who had previously been neutral or even supportive of Victoria's campaign against his security cameras began to question the larger agenda at play. By mid-afternoon, Victoria emerged from her strategy session, her composed facade showing slight cracks as she surveyed the impromptu community meeting in Eleanor's garden. She made a beeline for Marcus, her heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed, keeping her voice low despite her evident anger. "This development could have secured our community's future. Now, you've potentially derailed millions in investment." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "The community deserves to make informed decisions about its future. Transparency isn't just about security cameras, it's about protecting everyone's interests." Before Victoria could respond, Sarah Martinez approached with her tablet, displaying urgent news. 3 other upscale communities in the region had just gone public with their own struggles against Platinum Ridge's development tactics. The story was gaining traction in local media. Victoria's phone began buzzing incessantly. Thomas Drake's name flashed on the screen repeatedly, but she let it go to voicemail, her expression growing increasingly strained. The carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling in real time. As the afternoon progressed, more residents arrived at Eleanor's garden, many bringing chairs and refreshments as the impromptu gathering evolved into an unofficial community meeting. Marcus observed as natural leaders emerged from the crowd, organizing discussions about legal protections, property rights, and the future of Oakwood Gardens. A local news van appeared at the neighborhood entrance, drawn by social media buzz about the development controversy. Victoria retreated to her house, leaving Ashley to join a group of younger residents, discussing the importance of preserving community character. Marcus's security cameras continued their silent vigil, but their significance had transformed. What began as a personal security measure had become a symbol of community transparency and resistance against unwanted development. Neighbors who had once viewed the cameras with suspicion now saw them as a crucial first line of defense against external threats to their way of life. Eleanor Thompson, watching the community mobilize with evident satisfaction, shared an observation with Marcus. "You know, in all my years of education, I learned that the best lessons often come from unexpected sources. Victoria's crusade against your cameras may have inadvertently saved our neighborhood." As evening approached, Marcus received an email from Thomas Drake. The message was brief but telling. "We seem to have misunderstood each other. Perhaps we should discuss alternative approaches that better align with community interests." Marcus forwarded the email to his growing network of engaged neighbors, adding a simple comment, "Transparency works." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Residents began sharing their own stories of subtle pressures and hints about development plans they'd previously dismissed. Victoria's pristine white SUV remained in her driveway as darkness fell, its owner notably absent from the continuing community discussions. Through his security cameras, Marcus observed a steady stream of papers being fed into her home office shredder, the windows glow casting long shadows across her carefully maintained lawn. Jim Rodriguez, making his final security sweep of the neighborhood, paused by Marcus's driveway. "You know, in my years on the force, I learned that the best deterrent to any threat is a community that watches out for itself. Those cameras of yours might have just saved more than your property. They've awakened something in Oakwood Gardens." Marcus nodded, watching as the last groups of neighbors reluctantly dispersed from Eleanor's garden, their conversations continuing in hushed tones as they walked home. The day's events had transformed their quiet community into something stronger, more unified, and more aware of the power of collective vigilance. The following days brought an unexpected wave of support for Marcus's security measures, but Victoria wasn't finished yet. Her next move demonstrated just how far she was willing to go to maintain control over Oakwood Gardens. Early Tuesday morning, residents awoke to find official-looking notices posted on their doors. The documents bearing the HOA letterhead detailed a new community safety initiative that would centralize all security measures under HOA control. The proposal called for the removal of individual security systems in favor of a unified approach managed by a company called Secure View Solutions. Marcus examined the notice carefully, his cybersecurity instincts tingling. A quick background check revealed that Secure View Solutions had been incorporated just 3 weeks ago, with Thomas Drake listed as a primary investor. The connection to Platinum Ridge was obvious. if carefully obscured. Sarah Martinez arrived at Marcus's house shortly after sunrise, her real estate expertise providing valuable insight. "They're trying to regain control of the narrative," she explained, spreading out similar notices from other communities where Platinum Ridge had successfully implemented their development plans. By presenting it as a security upgrade rather than a removal, they're hoping to split community opinion. Eleanor Thompson joined them, bringing records from her years on the school board. "This reminds me of when corporate interests tried to take over our district security contracts," she mused, comparing the documents. The language is remarkably similar. As they discussed strategy, Marcus's security cameras captured an interesting scene. A team of professional photographers was documenting every security installation in the neighborhood, paying particular attention to properties where cameras were visible. Victoria supervised their work, clipboard in hand, her manner suggesting this was more than simple documentation. Jim Rodriguez, making his morning rounds, provided additional context. Those photographers, they work for an architectural visualization firm that specializes in development proposals. They're not just documenting, they're planning. Dr. Patricia Wong arrived with her own contribution to the growing resistance. "I've been reviewing studies on community displacement and its psychological impact," she explained, sharing research papers that documented the mental health effects of forced community changes. "This isn't just about property values anymore." Marcus spent the afternoon analyzing the proposed community safety initiative, line by line. His experience in corporate security helped him identify numerous red flags, vague implementation timelines, undefined oversight procedures, and carefully worded clauses that would give the HOA unprecedented control over private property security measures. Victoria's daughter, Ashley, who had become an unexpected ally, provided crucial inside information. "They're planning to present this at next week's HOA meeting," she revealed during a chance encounter at the local coffee shop. "Mum's been practicing her presentation for days. She's calling it The Future of Oakwood Gardens." As the sun set, Marcus noticed increased activity around Victoria's house. Security consultants from SecureView Solutions conducted what appeared to be a preliminary survey of the neighborhood, their actions captured in detail by his cameras. The irony wasn't lost on him. His security system was documenting its own potential replacement. That evening, Marcus hosted a strategy session in his home office. Sarah Martinez brought updated property values data, while Eleanor Thompson contributed her expertise in community organizing. Jim Rodriguez shared insights from his law enforcement background, helping identify potential legal challenges to the proposed changes. The group worked late into the night, developing a comprehensive response to Victoria's latest maneuver. They created detailed analyses of the SecureView proposal, highlighting its connections to Platinum Ridge and the potential risks to homeowner autonomy. Marcus's security footage of the day's surveillance activities provided powerful visual evidence of the coordinated effort to reshape their community. As they worked, Marcus's cameras captured Victoria making yet another late-night inspection of his security system. This time, she was accompanied by someone new, a legal consultant who specialized in eminent domain cases. The implications were clear. If they couldn't remove the security systems through HOA regulations, they would explore more aggressive options. Wednesday morning brought a new development. Anonymous letters appeared in several mailboxes warning about the dangers of private security systems and promoting the benefits of centralized control. Marcus's analysis of the writing style and document formatting strongly suggested Victoria's involvement, though proving it would be challenging. Sarah Martinez discovered that SecureView Solutions had already purchased domain names for several variations of Oakwood luxury residences, suggesting their plans extended far beyond simple security changes. The company's registered address led to a virtual office space that also housed several Platinum Ridge subsidiary companies. By mid-afternoon, the community had begun to mobilize. Eleanor Thompson organized a door-to-door information campaign, sharing documented evidence of similar tactics used in other neighborhoods. Dr. Wong provided professional insights into the psychological manipulation attempted by the anonymous letters, helping residents understand the sophisticated pressure being applied. Marcus's security cameras continued their vigilant monitoring, capturing every move in this increasingly complex chess game. They recorded Victoria's growing frustration as her carefully planned initiative met unexpected resistance, documenting her intense discussions with Thomas Drake and the Secure View team in her driveway. As evening approached, Marcus received an unexpected visit from Richard Sterling, Victoria's longtime attorney. The lawyer's expression was grave as he requested a private conversation. Inside Marcus's office, Sterling revealed his own concerns about the direction things were taking. "I've represented Victoria for years," he explained, "but this goes beyond normal HOA matters. They're pushing the legal boundaries in ways that make me uncomfortable." The revelation added another layer to the already complex situation. Marcus spent the night reviewing his security footage, documenting patterns of surveillance and coordination between Victoria's team and the various consultants now involved in the pressure campaign against private security measures. The community's response to Victoria's latest initiative would prove crucial in determining the future of Oakwood Gardens. As Marcus prepared for bed, his security cameras captured one final scene: Victoria standing in her driveway, phone to her ear, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with someone whose influence would soon become apparent to everyone in the neighborhood. The identity of Victoria's mysterious late-night caller became clear the next morning when a fleet of luxury vehicles pulled into Oakwood Gardens. Leading the convoy was Maxwell Sterling, Richard Sterling's senior partner and one of the city's most prominent real estate attorneys. His reputation for facilitating controversial development projects preceded him, and his presence signaled a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict. Sarah Martinez intercepted Maxwell Sterling as he strode toward Victoria's house, her real estate expertise giving her the confidence to engage directly. "Mr. Sterling, I believe you should know that the community is fully aware of Platinum Ridge's development history," she stated firmly, holding out a dossier of documented cases. Sterling paused briefly, his practiced smile never wavering as he accepted the documents. "My dear, development is simply progress by another name. Change is inevitable. The question is whether it will be managed or chaotic." Inside Victoria's house, an emergency strategy session was underway. Through his security cameras, Marcus observed a steady stream of legal consultants and corporate representatives entering and exiting. Victoria herself appeared energized by the reinforcements, her posture radiating renewed confidence as she directed various teams to different parts of the house. Eleanor Thompson, watching from her garden, noted the arrival of several city planning officials. "They're building a coalition," she observed, her years of educational administration experience helping her recognize the tactics. Victoria's trying to create the appearance of inevitable change. Dr. Wong provided psychological insight into the strategy. "It's a form of institutional pressure," she explained during an impromptu gathering at Marcus's house. "By bringing in authority figures and experts, they're attempting to make resistance seem futile or even irrational." Marcus spent the morning analyzing footage from his security cameras, documenting every visitor and cross-referencing them with public records. A pattern emerged. Many of the officials visiting Victoria's house had previous connections to Platinum Ridge developments in other communities. Jim Rodriguez arrived with concerning news from his police contacts. "They're preparing to file for a zoning variance," he revealed, sharing photographs of documents being carried into Victoria's house. If approved, it would override many of our existing community protections. As tension mounted in the neighborhood, Marcus received an unexpected ally. Richard Sterling, increasingly uncomfortable with his firm's involvement, provided crucial information about the legal strategy being developed. They're planning to argue that private security systems represent a form of unauthorized surveillance, he explained in a hushed meeting in Marcus's office. Maxwell's trying to frame it as a privacy rights issue. Victoria's daughter Ashley, observing the growing conflict with increasing concern, made her own move. She shared recordings of conversations between her mother and Thomas Drake, revealing their plans to gradually transition the entire neighborhood from private homes to luxury condominiums. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had compiled enough evidence to understand their opponent's full strategy. The plan was sophisticated. Use the security system dispute to establish HOA control over private property rights. Leverage that precedent to implement broader restrictions and ultimately create conditions that would make homeowners more receptive to Platinum Ridge's development offers. Sarah Martinez discovered that Secure View Solutions had already begun marketing luxury security packages to other upscale communities, using Oakwood Gardens as a reference, despite their proposal not yet being approved. The premature marketing materials included photographs of the neighborhood that had been digitally altered to remove all visible security features. Eleanor Thompson organized an emergency community meeting in the garden where residents shared their own discoveries about the developing situation. The collective knowledge painted a troubling picture of corporate overreach and manipulated procedures. As evening approached, Maxwell Sterling made his move. Certified letters were delivered to every household in Oakwood Gardens, outlining a complex legal argument against private security systems. The documents cited privacy concerns, property values, and community aesthetics, all wrapped in layers of legal jargon designed to intimidate. Marcus spent hours analyzing the letters, his cybersecurity background helping him decode the subtle threats hidden within the careful language. The ultimate message was clear: resist the changes and face expensive legal battles. Victoria appeared energized by this show of force, conducting another inspection of the neighborhood with Maxwell Sterling and Thomas Drake. Their confident demeanor suggested they believed victory was within reach. However, they hadn't anticipated the community's response. Dr. Wong organized a group of mental health professionals to document the psychological impact of corporate pressure tactics. Sarah Martinez mobilized her real estate network to provide contrary evidence about property values. Jim Rodriguez's police contacts shared information about increased crime rates in communities that had removed private security systems. As night fell, Marcus's security cameras captured an interesting scene. Richard Sterling engaged in an intense argument with his senior partner in Victoria's driveway. The younger lawyer's gestures suggested ethical concerns, while Maxwell's dismissive response indicated a commitment to proceeding regardless of potential consequences. A soft knock at Marcus's door revealed Ashley clutching a USB drive. They're planning to announce the full development project at next week's HOA meeting, she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Mum thinks the security system dispute will have weakened community resistance enough by then. Marcus's security system continued its silent vigil as he reviewed the new information, its cameras documenting every move in this increasingly complex battle. The technology that Victoria had tried so hard to remove was now serving as the primary witness to her attempts to transform Oakwood Gardens. The neighborhood settled into an uneasy quiet, but beneath the surface, both sides were preparing for what promised to be a decisive confrontation. Marcus's security cameras recorded one final scene that evening. Victoria standing in her garden, phone in hand, as she took photographs of his house in the fading light. Her expression suggested not just determination, but a hint of desperation, a recognition that her carefully laid plans might not unfold as smoothly as she had hoped. The morning of the crucial HOA meeting arrived with an unexpected development. Marcus's security cameras captured a series of unmarked vans entering Oakwood Gardens before dawn. Workers in secure view uniforms began installing temporary security poles throughout the neighborhood, each bearing professional-looking signs announcing future site of community security enhancement. Sarah Martinez arrived at Marcus's house early, her expression tense. "They're trying to create an illusion of inevitability," she explained, showing him similar tactics used in other communities where Platinum Ridge had successfully implemented their development plans. By making it look like changes are already underway, they hope to discourage resistance. Eleanor Thompson had spent the night organizing community response teams. Residents were divided into groups, each focusing on different aspects of the impending confrontation. Some documented the unauthorized installations, others prepared presentations on property rights, and a third group coordinated with local media outlets. Dr. Wong's professional analysis of the psychological tactics being employed proved invaluable. "They're using environmental manipulation to create a sense of powerlessness," she observed, watching the workers through Marcus's window. But understanding the strategy often negates its effectiveness. Victoria emerged from her house mid-morning, impeccably dressed in a power suit that practically radiated authority. She conducted a walking tour with Maxwell Sterling and Thomas Drake, gesturing confidently at the newly installed signs. Her daughter Ashley, watching from their driveway, sent Marcus a text. "Mom's prepared a 3-hour presentation. They're planning to wear down resistance through exhaustion." Jim Rodriguez's police contacts provided crucial information about the evening's security arrangements. "They've hired private security guards to manage access to the community center," he reported, "supposedly for crowd control, but more likely to intimidate residents." Marcus spent the morning implementing his own strategy. His security cameras had been recording every unauthorized installation, every interaction, and every subtle pressure tactic. He compiled the footage into a compelling documentary of corporate overreach and community manipulation. Richard Sterling made one final attempt to reason with his senior partner, their heated discussion captured clearly by Marcus's cameras. "This goes beyond normal development procedures," the younger lawyer argued. "We're pushing ethical boundaries." Maxwell's dismissive response spoke volumes about their intended course of action. As afternoon approached, Victoria's team began setting up elaborate audio-visual equipment in the community center. The scale of their presentation suggested they believed this meeting would be decisive in their campaign to transform Oakwood Gardens. Sarah Martinez discovered something interesting in the preliminary setup. "They've prepared celebration materials," she whispered to Marcus. "They're so confident of victory they've already printed 'Welcome to the new Oakwood Gardens' banners." Eleanor Thompson organized a pre-meeting gathering in her garden where residents could review all the evidence they'd gathered. The documentation painted a clear picture of coordinated efforts to undermine community autonomy through manipulated regulations and corporate pressure. Marcus received an unexpected email from a former colleague in corporate security. The message contained background checks on several key players in the development scheme, revealing patterns of similar tactics used in other communities. The information arrived just in time to be incorporated into their response strategy. Victoria's confidence showed signs of strain as residents began arriving at the community center early, many carrying folders of documentation and legal research. Her carefully orchestrated presentation assumed a weary, resigned audience, not an informed, resistant one. Ashley provided one final piece of crucial information. "They've prepared multiple versions of the meeting minutes," she revealed during a brief encounter in the parking lot. "They're planning to push through approvals, regardless of actual vote counts." Marcus's security cameras continued their silent documentation as the neighborhood prepared for the evening's confrontation. Their footage would prove invaluable in demonstrating the systematic attempt to override community rights and resident autonomy. The community center filled quickly, with every seat occupied well before the scheduled start time. Victoria's team seemed unsettled by the organized, determined atmosphere among the residents. Maxwell Sterling was observed making several urgent phone calls, while Thomas Drake continuously checked his tablet, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Dr. Wong circulated among the residents, offering quiet support and reinforcing their confidence in standing up to corporate pressure. Her professional presence helped maintain calm despite the tense atmosphere. Sarah Martinez strategically positioned key community members throughout the room, ensuring that every attempted manipulation or procedural irregularity would be observed and documented. Her real estate expertise helped residents understand exactly what was at stake. Jim Rodriguez's law enforcement background proved invaluable as he managed interactions with the private security guards, ensuring they didn't overstep their authority or intimidate residents. His calm professionalism helped maintain order while protecting community rights. As the meeting's start time approached, Marcus's security cameras captured one final significant scene. Victoria, standing alone in the parking lot, staring at her phone as she received what appeared to be unwelcome news. Her carefully constructed plan was about to meet its greatest challenge, and the security system she had tried so hard to remove would document every moment of the confrontation. The community center's doors closed, and the meeting that would determine the future of Oakwood Gardens began. Victoria took her place at the podium, her composure slightly strained as she faced a room full of informed, determined residents. The security cameras that had started this conflict continued their vigilant monitoring, ensuring that every attempt to override community rights would be documented for posterity. Victoria's pivotal HOA meeting unfolded in unexpected ways. As she began her elaborate presentation about the future of Oakwood Gardens, Marcus quietly activated his laptop, connecting it to the community center's display system. The security footage he had compiled began playing silently on a secondary screen, providing a stark visual backdrop to Victoria's carefully crafted narrative. The evidence was irrefutable. Time-stamped footage showed every late-night inspection, every unauthorized photograph, every hushed meeting with developers. The cameras that Victoria had fought so hard to remove had documented her entire campaign to transform the neighborhood. Maxwell Sterling attempted to intervene, citing procedural rules, but Eleanor Thompson smoothly countered with the HOA bylaws regarding transparency and community rights. The retired school principal's intimate knowledge of administrative procedures proved invaluable in maintaining the residents' right to present evidence. Sarah Martinez seized a crucial moment to present her analysis of property values. Her data showed that communities maintaining private security measures consistently outperformed those that had adopted centralized systems. More importantly, she revealed documentation showing how Platinum Ridge's previous developments had led to the displacement of long-term residents. Victoria's composure cracked slightly as Thomas Drake received an urgent message on his tablet. The Platinum Ridge executive's expression suggested serious complications with their carefully orchestrated plan. Ashley, watching from the back of the room, later revealed that other communities had begun investigating similar development schemes. Dr. Wong provided expert testimony about the psychological impact of corporate development tactics on established communities, Her professional analysis helped residents understand how the security system dispute had been weaponized to create uncertainty and compliance. Jim Rodriguez's presence proved crucial when Victoria attempted to have the private security guards restrict access to certain residents. His law enforcement background and calm authority ensured that everyone's rights were protected, despite growing tensions. Richard Sterling, in a move that visibly shocked his senior partner, stepped forward to address the community. The young lawyer's ethical concerns had finally outweighed his professional obligations. He detailed how the security system dispute had been engineered as a pretext for larger development plans. Victoria's carefully prepared presentation began to unravel as residents asked increasingly informed questions. Each point she raised was met with documented evidence of coordination between the HOA leadership and Platinum Ridge's development team. The security cameras had captured every step of their systematic attempt to undermine community autonomy. Marcus watched silently as Victoria's allies began to distance themselves. Board members who had previously supported her initiatives now asked pointed questions about the relationship with SecureView Solutions. The temporary security poles installed that morning stood as awkward testimony to their premature confidence. In a final desperate move, Victoria attempted to call an immediate vote on the security system regulations. Eleanor Thompson calmly cited the bylaw requiring proper notice for significant policy changes, effectively blocking the attempt to force a quick decision. The meeting's turning point came when Ashley shared the multiple versions of pre-prepared minutes, each showing different voting outcomes. The revelation of such blatant procedural manipulation shocked even Victoria's staunchest supporters. Thomas Drake quietly gathered his materials and left the meeting, his hasty exit captured by Marcus's cameras. The Platinum Ridge executive's departure marked the beginning of the end for Victoria's development plans. Maxwell Sterling attempted to salvage the situation with legal threats, but the community stood firm. The evidence compiled through Marcus's security system had created an insurmountable barrier to their planned takeover of Oakwood Gardens. Victoria's resignation as HOA president came swiftly, delivered via email the following morning. The security cameras captured her hasty departure from the neighborhood, her car loaded with boxes of documents. The community gathered in Eleanor's garden to celebrate their victory. The temporary security poles were removed, replaced by professionally installed signs reading "Protected by Community Watch." Marcus's security system had evolved from a point of contention to a symbol of neighborhood autonomy. Sarah Martinez reported increased interest in Oakwood Gardens properties, with buyers specifically asking about security measures. The community's successful resistance to corporate development had actually enhanced its appeal to families seeking stable, protected neighborhoods. Jim Rodriguez helped establish a new community security committee, ensuring that future measures would balance safety with resident rights. His experience helped create guidelines that protected both individual and community interests. Dr. Wong observed a strengthened sense of community cohesion following the conflict. The shared experience of defending their neighborhood had created lasting bonds between residents who had previously barely known each other. Richard Sterling's ethical stand led to his departure from his brother's firm and the establishment of his own practice focusing on community rights. His first clients were other neighborhoods facing similar development pressures. Ashley emerged as an unexpected community leader, using her insider knowledge of corporate development tactics to help other neighborhoods protect themselves. Her experience with Victoria's schemes provided valuable insight into recognizing and resisting similar pressures. Marcus's security system continued its quiet vigilance, but its significance had transformed. What began as a personal security measure had become a testament to the power of transparency and community solidarity. The final footage from that transformative period showed Victoria's house being sold to a young family who immediately installed their own security cameras. The new residents understood that in Oakwood Gardens, visible security measures weren't just about protection. They were about preserving community independence and resident rights. As Marcus reviewed the security footage one last time, he reflected on how a simple dispute over cameras had exposed and defeated a sophisticated attempt to dismantle their community. The technology that Victoria had tried so hard to remove had ultimately ensured the preservation of Oakwood Gardens as a neighborhood where residents controlled their own destiny. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.